A city where nightmares are born, Moscow in the winter of 1994 was a city torn apart. Glittering shop windows and neon-lit casinos beckoned with promises of quick wealth. But behind their gleam lurked a darker reality. The collapse of the Soviet Union had fractured society, leaving a chasm between the affluent and the destitute. For ex-convicts, drifters, and those cast aside by life, Moscow was both a magnet and a trap. The city promised everything, and nothing. In its icy alleys, dreams were born, but more often, nightmares took root. For decades, the Soviet Union had tried to reform criminals, to return them to society as redeemed citizens. The sprawling system of corrective labor camps was meant to be the answer. Inmates were supposed to emerge with clean consciences, ready to rebuild their lives. But reality was far grimmer. Those released found themselves in a world where the divide between rich and poor was stark and unforgiving. Moscow, with its shocking contrast, was the epicenter of this new reality. The city tempted, seduced, and pushed people to the edge. For some, that edge was deadly. Tragedy on Frunzenskaya. On January 31st, 1994, time froze in a tenement at 3rd Frunzenskaya Street, house number 10. In the cramped, metallic-smelling elevator of the building, the body of a young woman, Irina Klemenko, was discovered. Her body, ravaged by 21 stab wounds, lay in a pool of blood. The elevator walls, silent witnesses, bore the marks of her desperate struggle. Irina had screamed, begged for help, but her cries were swallowed by the grinding hum of the elevator's machinery. The neighbors, barricaded behind their heavy apartment doors, heard nothing, or chose to hear nothing. The investigation hit a wall from the start. No clues, no fingerprints, no stray hairs, no witnesses. Only Irina's blood soaked into her fur coat. Rape? No evidence. Robbery? Unlikely. She carried no more than $50, and her coat, the only valuable item, was left untouched. A contract killing. Irina wasn't involved in business, had no debts or enemies. Jealousy? That theory crumbled as quickly as it arose. The killer had vanished into Moscow's frigid air, leaving behind only questions and fear. Irina's husband, shattered by grief, couldn't accept her loss. "It feels like a nightmare," he whispered, staring at the empty doorway, "as if my Irina will walk through any moment, and everything will be as it was." Their young son, who had seen his mother's body in the elevator, screamed, "Mama! Mama!" That cry echoed in his father's heart. To shield the boy from further horror, he kept him from the funeral, sparing him the sight of his mother in a coffin. Later at the cemetery, they sat by her grave, holding hands. The boy's teacher recalled how he would suddenly leap up during lessons, as if hoping his mother was just away on a trip and would soon return. "She's on a business trip," he told his father. "She'll be back soon." But she never came back. Of murders, the first week of February brought a new nightmare. In an elevator on Frunzenskaya embankment, another woman was found, a young nurse. The scene was chillingly familiar. Multiple stab wounds, blood soaked into her fur coat, and no clues. No one heard her screams. The elevator, a cold, metallic tomb, had become a place of execution once again. The residents stayed silent, their doors locked, while the killer slipped away like a ghost. Before the investigators could catch their breath, it happened again. The next day, another woman in the elevator, another bloodbath. The killer's sadistic cruelty was staggering. He didn't rob or assault his victims. He simply killed, coldly, methodically, with terrifying precision. The police were put on high alert. If this was a maniac, they thought, he wouldn't stop. The next strike could come at any moment. The investigation clung to one faint lead. All the victims wore fur coats. The blood soaked into the fur, leaving no traces on the elevator floor. Was this calculation or coincidence? There were no other clues, no bloody footprints, no witnesses. In the archives of Petrovka 38, detectives sifted through old cases, questioned random passersby, and sketched composite images. But it was all in vain. The killer was a phantom. And operational headquarters worked around the clock, and the best detectives from MUR were deployed to Moscow's Southwest District, where this bloody drama unfolded. Forensics offered a sliver of insight. The killer was likely young and tall. That was all they had. Dozens were detained, including fugitives from federal wanted lists, but none were the one they sought. Days passed and the killer remained a shadow. Had he gone dormant or left the city? Moscow waited, holding its breath, but fear had seeped into every home. City in panic. Exactly 1 week later, in the same district, the shadow struck again. Another woman dead in an elevator, the same savage stab wounds, the same sadism. But this time, the killer made a mistake. As he exited the elevator, he left bloody footprints. It was his first slip, a hint of vulnerability. Emboldened by his impunity, he was growing careless, and that made him even more dangerous. The next murder could happen at any moment. Moscow trembled. Women stopped wearing fur coats, terrified of becoming the next target. Streets, once bustling, grew eerily quiet by dusk. I saw my mother, my wife, my sister in every victim, one operative recalled. We couldn't stop. Every shift was a battle. The headquarters never rested. Officers stayed on double, triple shifts. No one wanted the list of victims to grow. Operation Fur Coat. A game with death. February 14th, 1994, 9:30 p.m. The detectives noticed a chilling pattern. The murders followed a schedule. One, then a week's pause, two in a row, another week, then another killing. Was the killer coming to Moscow, striking and leaving? The victims' purses, with small sums of money, were missing. Pocket change for Moscow, but a fortune for an outsider. If he was still in the city, the next crime could happen today or tomorrow. The transport police scoured train stations, hotels, and railway cars on sidings where undocumented drifters often stayed. The checks were loud, meant to scare the killer off. But, as they later learned, he was hiding in one of those very train car hotels, slipping through the net. The police launched Operation Fur Coat, a desperate bid to catch the maniac. Over 1,000 officers, women operatives dressed in fur coats posing as potential victims, and plainclothes detectives ready for anything. They rode the metro, Kirovskaya, Serpukhovskaya, and ring lines, strolled the streets, lingered by shops and currency exchanges. Every step was a gamble with death. Stay calm, don't turn around, crackled the radios. He's moving. One evening near Frunzenskaya metro station, operatives spotted a tall young man. His movements were sharp, his hands buried in his pockets. He darted toward a building where a woman in a fur coat had just entered. They detained him, a knife in his pocket. Hearts raced. Was this him? But the forensics report crushed their hopes. The knife wasn't the one used in the murders. The operation pressed on, nearly 24 hours without sleep. Bulletproof vests chafed under fur coats. How much longer, the operatives wondered. What if he's not even in Moscow? What if he's already chosen his next victim? But stopping wasn't an option. Real victims didn't have vests. Climax. The shadow caught. Evening at Université Metro Station. A young man with a bag, his movements jittery, eyes scanning the crowd. He fidgets with his bag as if hiding something. Then, a sudden move. He follows a woman in a fur coat exiting a tram at Cheryomushkinsky Market. The operatives trail him, pulses pounding. In the tram, he rummages in his bag. A knife. The woman steps off and he follows. Suspicions mount. There's no time to hesitate. If he enters the building, it'll be too late. At the last moment, perhaps sensing the tail, he veers off. The woman, unaware that death had brushed past her, disappears into the building. They apprehend him. His name, Alexander Chaika, age 20, from Sumy, Ukraine. Who was Chaika? Alexander Chaika wasn't just a killer. He was a product of a system that broke him early. At 16, he took part in a gang rape. The victim survived and identified him. Chaika learned a lesson. No witnesses should live. Juvenile detention didn't reform him. It hardened him. Released early to avoid an adult prison, he emerged not as a reformed citizen, but as a predator. The humble trades he'd been taught held no appeal. He knew a better way to make a living. In Moscow, he hunted. His victims brought small sums, petty by the city's standards, a fortune for a provincial boy. He didn't plan to stay long. A wedding awaited him in 2 days. But his plans crumbled when the operatives closed in. The shadow that had terrorized Moscow was caught. Epilogue. A city that won't forget. 4 women, 4 lives snuffed out in cold elevators. Moscow exhaled, but the scars remained. Operation Fur Coat became a legend in the city's police history, a testament to the lengths taken to stop a maniac. But behind every victory was pain. The pain of families who lost loved ones. The pain of detectives who lived in fear of the next victim. The city moved on. Shop lights still beckoned, streets hummed with life. But in the shadows, Moscow kept its secrets. And every person stepping into an elevator glanced over their shoulder, listening for a rustle. The shadow was gone, but its echo lingered forever.